All right, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing time so far. Our next panel is titled AI-Driven Devices, Personalized, Predict, Prevent. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the virtual stage. And I'll hand it over to Amit, our moderator.
Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here and excited for a great conversation with some phenomenal experts that have a great background. I'd like to first turn this over to Dave, who can introduce himself and his background.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for the invitation. This is Dave Bapat. I lead the Medical Devices Data Science Engineering and Product Management with Johnson & Johnson Medical Devices. I've been in this role for over a couple of years now. And it's been great to have this occasion to talk about our progress in medical devices.
Great, John.
Hi, everyone. John Kalafut here. I've been acting as the chief scientist for informatics and AI development for clinical analytics within GE Healthcare's global research and outcomes organization. I've had a number of roles within GE across the years in terms of solution development, in addition to 20-ish years in embedded medical devices for radiology, cardiology, and my scientific and academic interests are in the biomedical signal processing, image analysis, image processing. And I'm currently moving into principal of my own consulting business in medical product development, especially with machine learning and AI.
Wonderful, cool. And my name is Amit. I have the fortune of being the moderator, and my background is primarily in medical device and consumer healthcare technology. I currently sit in the product management business of Dexcom, which is a leading continuous glucose monitoring solution. I have the great fortune of trying to bring in more of the AI and digital aspect of diabetes management to Dexcom as we continue to become a leader in diabetes management, both for type 1 and type 2 people living with diabetes. I've had experience at Fitbit, where I was in their B2B business, leading product development and product marketing efforts, as well as at Medtronic, where I've worked in cardiology, neurology, and diabetes as well in various product development and marketing leadership roles. So I think we have a great cross-section of experience across different therapies, different players in the market. So I think this should be a rich and robust conversation. Let's start with the first question. So maybe I'll have John kick us off. Let's think about the last 12 months. Obviously, it's been tough for all of us. Do you think AI, or I guess better question is, has AI played a supporting role during COVID-19?
I think so one of the wonderful aspects of AI being such a broad term, I guess I think I could answer this in a broad way as well. So if you think about all the amazing biotechnology advances that had to happen to get to a vaccine within to market in 12 months, there is a whole lot of machine learning and biostatistics that really has helped revolutionize pharma and biotech development. So I think so from that perspective, I think yes, that is probably one of the most visible signs of again defining AI. We've talked about supervised, unsupervised machine learning, definitely. I would say so with my experience at GE, we were involved in a lot of different activities, both in terms of manufacturing ventilators, but in terms of taking on analytic development projects to help do predictive monitoring, to do predictive assessments from an image analysis perspective. Can you do automation of X-ray and CT? I would say there's maybe some I would say organic technologies that some health systems have developed in terms of trying to help track and triage. There have been a whole flurry of publications in terms of COVID algorithms using data analysis. But I think that the reality, though, this is one of the challenges in healthcare, as we all know, that barrier of how do you go from a promising concept, how do you get it out of retrospective data analysis, how do you actually deploy it into a living, breathing health system? Again, we have gotten close on a couple of our vital signs and critical care business, but even there, and then working in partnership with some of our academic partners. So again, I've seen and we've known, and there's results of some health systems that have deployed their own. But from a frontline management, I think that again, this is some of the barriers and opportunities moving forward. I think thinking about additional pandemics that would happen, how can we better quickly mobilize the infrastructure? So how can we have a ready-made almost environment where you can quickly, rapidly prototype and develop applications, especially given the right regulatory environment. I think is something that we should all be considering from a public health perspective moving forward.
Yeah, Devavrat, any thoughts? Or Dave?
Yeah, no, I echo most of the comments that John made, and I think there are a few that I would add on top of it. I think, it has been an interesting journey. And as many of you guys are aware, the adoption of technology has improved in general. Just like right now, we are on a Zoom call together. It has also improved in large hospitals and in the medical devices. Johnson & Johnson plays less in the wearable areas or the diagnostic. We play more in the therapeutic area. And even in therapeutic areas, we have seen the adoption improve significantly in a couple of areas in large hospitals and even in small ASCs. So if I have to give you some examples, this business historically has been a very sales surgeon, clinical specialist, relationship driven business. So product is always at the core. If you don't have a good product, nothing else matters. But beyond that, the surgeons and sales reps and clinical specialists generally work together during a surgery as well, which was deemed physically impossible during the COVID crisis. Virtual OR was not something that surgeons were keen on, but now there are enough virtual ORs that have started where you can get remote guidance. And actually that, in a way, because of that, that has helped us record surgeries and apply AI and ML to actually focus on what are the areas in the OR that can kind of further be improved on efficiency. It has driven a different type of discussion as well in some cases. So during the COVID crisis, I still remember we can actually work now with IDNs, our integrated delivery networks. It's no longer just a commercial relationship only. It is more of now innovative partnership where we have facilitated information exchange for safe shutdown and initiation of procedures, but also now focused on innovative partnerships. We actually also see some of that improvement in the patient arena as well. Initially, when COVID struck, most of the patients were scared to go to even for basic screenings for colon cancer or for thoracic lung cancer, etc. So now with the newer technologies and with remote screening, that has also started helping a little bit. So although this was a major event almost once in a century, it has in a way accelerated the adoption of technology in certain areas. And I think John already covered some of the areas in pharma for vaccines, etc. J&J actually was one of the bigger beneficiaries. Our pharma unit has actually applied a lot of AI and ML for site selection, for drug selection, and for trials as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, I was directly impacted, if you will, by COVID-19 in my work at Fitbit. As a leading company that provides, a sensing of heart rate and respiratory rate, we hosted one of the largest COVID-19 studies to see if we could see through AI and machine learning any type of pre-indicators of symptoms that a person would have that would indicate that they would be highly likely to have COVID-19. The challenge with COVID-19 was that it was asymptomatic, right? So the spread of it was just so difficult to control because some people didn't realize they had it. And so if we can determine based on biometrics in your body that you're not even realizing that you are developing because you have it, but it doesn't feel symptomatic, we could have the power to almost warn you of COVID-19 or predict that you'll have COVID-19 and make you do the appropriate, protocols to avoid any kind of spread. So, we actually did launch a COVID-19 study. We launched a capability for employees to use our device to determine if it's safe for them to go to work, based on noticing patterns of those that already were positive for COVID-19. We backtracked about a week to see what was happening with their heart rate, their respiratory rate, all things that we put into our machine learning system, built algorithms to determine patterns of people that had developed COVID, and then putting that as a prognostic or predictive capability for future users. So no, there's a lot happening in terms of being able to, at a mass scale, track and monitor symptoms. We have the technology now to be able to read things in your body that you're not even recognizing as changing, because we have those technologies, and being able to almost prevent or predict a disease before it even fully manifests in your body or gives you the symptoms. So that was very exciting. And just given the size of our users, we have the luxury of having all of those data points to really do a mass data analysis exercise and leverage smart algorithms and AI techniques to be able to refine algorithms to make sure that they're accurate, right? Because the last thing you want also is to scare people or to be labeling folks as potentially having COVID-19 and causing them to have unnecessary anxiety or hysteria. Important. AI is only as good as what powers the algorithms, what powers the learning, and so you have to have a robust data set to be able to capture all the edge cases. So definitely a lot of application of AI through COVID-19, just given, again, how new it was for us, but how quickly we wanted to be able to get a grasp on it, if you will, and control the outbreaks. So exciting.
No, that's
stuff.
a great example, because I think actually that lends, I think, into the next question. I think because of the flurry of work and activities, I mean, just rethinking my previous comments a little bit, I don't want to downplay all the great work that has happened, and I think it really is changing the landscape in terms of what's possible and what can be done. And I think a lot of the more prognostic diagnostic technologies are starting now to emerge. I mean, for instance, even in tracking, understanding long COVID, colleagues of mine from Oxford are doing this really wonderful study on tracking and understanding inflammation of different organs using, MRI. There's then the fusion of those with other biomarkers. So I think in a lot of ways the pandemic has said, hey, yeah, we can do a lot. We just need that access, right? We need to, also all the stresses that on interoperability and those challenges and the delivery and then the validation of these things, I think is hopefully, right, changes a lot, I think, of the landscape.
Yeah, I think we've never had the urgency for all of us to begin to collaborate and work together. I mean, I don't think there's anything more urgent than knowing that people are at risk of dying if you don't figure out a way to solve this. So I think we all had that flame under the butt, if you will. But hopefully we can continue to provide these applications to areas that don't have as grave consequences, but are still very beneficial to apply AI. So I definitely don't want to live through another pandemic, but I'm excited for what the pandemic has created in terms of capabilities that we can apply to other things that are not as life and death, if you will. So,
well, I think that makes sense, right? Because if once you have the necessary, I mean, this infrastructure was built in a hurry for all the obvious reasons. But once the infrastructure is there, now it becomes a lot more easier. Absent of this event, there was a high likelihood that there would have been a lot of debates and discussions to have this infrastructure in place, to have such virtual guidance in place, or to have the information exchanges in place. Now, all of it was just built because of COVID. Now, then, I don't think anybody is going to go back and say, okay, the crisis is over, let's dismantle it. So I think now that it's built, I think it's going to have the adoption even faster.
Oh, absolutely. No, I think we are living in a new normal. That's very cliche, but I think we're getting to the end of this pandemic. But to your point, Dave, there's a lot that hopefully will stick and will just enhance from here.
I guess I'm sorry. As I say, a question on your Fitbit experience. So was that a push from Fitbit, or was there a collaborative pull? And then how, in terms of then the deployment of the solution, what was the story there?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously we saw it as a good opportunity. We are tracking a lot of the data points that was indicated that we noticed with data tracking that there were things that we captured from our device that are helping to predict COVID. And we were careful not to say that we could guarantee that, but we noticed that there were certain biofactors. And then in terms of when it really got serious, we definitely engaged with the Scripps research organization. I mean, we worked with a lot of CROs. This was not only a commercial driven effort, right? Because I think people wouldn't trust, it would become very transparent if we're just trying to say, listen, buy our devices because we can predict COVID-19. If there's no clinical substantiation or anyone to say that, no, actually, we have medical staff on file to, or medical staff on board to validate this. So yeah, it was again, a very kind of quickly put together initiative that then had to be validated. We worked again, like with Stanford, we worked with Scripps, we worked with the NIH, to get their opinion, their validation, their perspective, and then went from there. So, and then obviously it had to do a lot of, determining like what is enough, right? How many people do we want in our study to prove that there is a correlation, not, or, a causation versus correlation, or, what are we actually, willing to put our money behind in terms of, do we want to say that we can actually predict COVID? Do we want to just say that, this is more of a just sickness indicator? So, and Vipit has been exploring that even before COVID-19. I mean, we have been trying to predict the flu, other diseases, because again, we collect such a robust set of health metrics. But COVID-19 was just such a, immediate and necessary application. So it was definitely something that we worked jointly with and were responsible about pushing out, after we'd done all the back validation, if you will. Because the last thing you want to do is, again, create unnecessary hysteria. And, there's a lot of things that people got excited about, like with contact tracing. And, I think there was this flurry of activity, and if you don't kind of constrain it, it can get carried away. It can take a life of its own. And then you start having people, using it for the wrong reasons. And, there's already so much anxiety about COVID. The last thing you want to do is stir the pot. So.
And it is that done under the context of medical software as a medical device? So did Fitbit have or has a regulated?
It's a great question, actually. No, so this was actually not a particular. We were very careful. We didn't want to get into the FDA regulated space, just because again, then it adds a whole new lens of control and scrutiny and regulation. So we were very careful not to, say things like we could predict that you have COVID, right? We were a bit softer in our language in terms of how this tool can be used. Didn't want to start to say that we could, sense when you have a breakout in your organization, because that, again, to your point, would move us into an FDA space. So we had to straddle that line, if you will, and not go down the route of actually saying that we can diagnose. Like, we can't say we'll diagnose you with COVID-19. That's impossible with a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or what have you. So.
Yeah, because Dave, I'm sure I'm wondering what J&J's experience is. That because of just being in a major medical device manufacturer, applying machine learning and AI, sometimes it's I don't want to say it's not right, but there there needs to be a certain amount of quality and oversight. But what's been your experience there across your portfolio?
I think adoption. I mean, generally, most of medtech companies or most of healthcare companies are generally a little bit risk averse, so they would want to prove the technology, because ultimately, right? And I always joke about this: when you apply AI and ML on Amazon or Facebook, there's a good chance that you might order a wrong product or have a wrong friend request, which is different than putting the wrong voltage or current into the human tissue. So that's why there is a different level of rigor that goes into the instrumentation and AI. I think even there, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I think wherever there is a human in the loop, on the commercial side, the adoption of AI and ML is generally faster. Whenever the human in the loop is generally a surgeon, because ultimately, I don't think we are anywhere close. I mean, surgeon is still going to be the primary conductor of the procedures. So when the human in the loop is surgeon, you want to make it as smooth as possible for the surgeon and reduce as many errors as possible for the surgeon, as well as all the supporting team members. So that's where there is a lot more rigor to it, of course, for all the obvious reasons. And I think, and I know we are going to talk eventually, but I think that sometimes also presents challenges, because each hospital has its own set of procedures to share information with the manufacturing companies. So AI and ML generally needs a lot of volume of data to train correctly. And in many cases, the lot of volume takes a lot of time.
Well, yeah, and this is kind of a good segue in terms of how AI has changed the space and what are the challenges. I think, absolutely, every industry is trying to find their way to have AI, you know. And I think one thing that's really interesting, and what I've learned in my time, you know, at Fitbit in particular, straddling the consumer tech and the more traditional med tech space, all the consumer tech companies are wanting to get into healthcare. The Googles, the Apples, the Fitbits, you know, the Amazons, they all want to get into healthcare because healthcare is the business of people, and there's always people, and people are always getting sick. I think what's challenging for a company like a consumer tech like Fitbit trying to go into AI into healthcare is that they are not used to all the healthcare regulations. They're not a regulated industry, and so they're not sure how to handle FDA audits. I mean, Fitbit is getting into FDA approved features. I mean, we have an AFib detection algorithm to help detect arrhythmias, you know, which is FDA regulated. We are trying to get into stress, you know, management and almost getting into blood pressure issue prediction, which are all getting into FDA regulation. But then the challenge is they come in and they want, you know, an audit, they want to know where all the data is. And these consumer tech companies have been built so fast, they don't have like all the right systems, and a lot of it, like, I mean, Fitbit exploded and they just kind of, it was like Band-Aid after Band-Aid of trying to find infrastructure to support the growth. And then you never think you have to come back and do an audit of it because you never think in the beginning you want to get into healthcare. So so I think it's hard to pivot from consumer to healthcare. You can't just casually be in healthcare, right? I know the Google, you know, company as well, Googles of the world have also tried, and they just realized you can't just be in healthcare casually. At the same time, what I think we need to take a page out of their playbook is just getting the users. Like, they are mainstream. Like, if you want good AI capabilities, you need users to provide input, like especially like in diabetes management as an example, or any kind of digital health application. You need users on your product. You need users to provide additional data and context. I mean, like in diabetes, every company is trying to figure out how to have someone track their food, their sleep, their exercise, because all that influences glucose and can help enrich and empower the AI engine. But people only do that if you create a good user experience, right? Or if you keep your product sexy enough to keep them on it, so you can have that volume of data. And they know how to do it, right? They've built products that millions and billions of people are on. So my point is, I guess, like, you know, the med tech world has to learn, you know, if they want powerful AI, they need to have a lot of, you know, the data, and they need to have people using it, giving us contextual information, because the more richer information we can get from the users, the patients, the doctors who have you, whoever's your customer, the more you can refine your models and actually have the AI being more value add, right? And so I think that's, you know, where I'm excited is like, where can we take a page out of each other's playbooks to build a meaningful solution that is, you know, powerful, but is, again, used by users. We get the data, and then, you know, we can continue to iterate. So
right, no, that's a great point actually. And I mean, said in the same way, right? What I've noticed is healthcare companies are great at building physical products, and consumer companies, Google's, Amazons of the world, are great at building digital products. How do we make sure that we learn from another, where healthcare medtech companies or even pharma companies may not be the best at building digital products, but how can they take a leaf out of the book to make sure that they are building good digital products? Because the end consumer base in the therapeutic area is smaller. You have, when you have a digital product for Google or Facebook or even Fitbit, you're talking about millions and millions or hundreds of millions of end users. Here, generally, the product is in the hands, at least in the therapeutic area, and even diagnostic, I would imagine, with G, the product is in the hands of hundreds or thousands of people. So the user base is small, but the value per user is significant, because that's one surgeon is going to perform more than 1,000 surgeries every year and hence that becomes important.
Yeah. No, Dave, that's, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think what I was going to say was that's where we are seeing some innovation. If you look at how is surgical outcome improving, again, you need to have surgeon in the middle, but AI is helping us a lot in improving predictions right now. That can tell us how the eventual outcome is improving, and that allows, but frankly, the surgeon to focus on the core part, which is surgery. So we can actually have AI give an early prediction of outcome, which will then help surgeon either validate and course correct or continue, because again, human anatomy is different. And medical devices are actually even more complex, I would argue, because in a pharmaceutical, you have the product and patient interaction. In medical devices, you have product, patient, surgeon, and environment interaction. So there are more variables at play, which is why the surgeon is the closest. We are not yet at a point where we have a algorithm and a digital product for n=1, meaning for every patient, which means that surgeon will always be in the surgeon will always be the final decision maker. And that's where we are focused on how can we make the surgeon and the supporting cast actually more kind of focused, and how can we take the rest of the headaches away from them using AI.
Yeah, I mean, I actually love how you said that, Dave, in terms of the need. So yeah, so you're absolutely right that, you know, the digital companies that have become mass consumer appeal know how to build products that people love, but when you go to the medtech world, you have different stakeholders, and you have to, there's still the clinical oversight that has to happen that makes it effective and meaningful. Because if the surgeon, if the doctor is not if they can't use it in the right way in their practice, or if they can't deliver medicine the way they need to deliver it, because you're talking about, you know, serious health outcomes, you're not going to have the adoption. So another perfect example that Fitbit and Apple Watch both got into with this AFib detection is, generally speaking, physicians do not love, you know, digital tech products. They don't prescribe these products because I think one thing that they struggle with is, like, for example, with this AFib detection, there were a ton of false positives, right? So what ends up happening is that you have a flood of people coming into the hospital saying, listen, I think I have AFib, tell me what to do. And it's like, well, you know, we didn't prescribe this diagnostic tool. We don't understand what the algorithm is. We don't know. I mean, could you just be wearing it a certain way? I mean, it's incredible how much variability you have in terms of the use of these devices, right? Some people wear it tight, some people wear it loose. And if a physician is like, I was not part of you wearing this device, I don't know if you wore it, you know, when at times of stress, I mean, when you're exercising, I mean, there's so many variables. I can't be responsible to provide, even though it's a great algorithm and, you know, it's got merit, and I'm glad to know that it's, again, everyone's using it. Like, I have a hard time putting people on a heart machine because no one wants to wear it. It's cumbersome, right? So I love that you all have this data, but again, I didn't validate it. So now you're coming to me, and so they get upset, right? So that's I think the crux of the issue, and kind of getting to the third question of what are the challenges of AI in medical device space. You can't ignore the fact that there is clinical pathways. There's like, there's ways to deliver medicine effectively, medtech effectively, and where will it crumble in terms of physicians not being part of the journey, or, you know, needing more clinical validation? Because you can't just have everyone saying, oh, well, even the cancer screenings, I think, will also artificially overcompensate, right? And you'll have a bunch of people saying, oh my God, I have cancer. It's like, well, you don't, you know, and I can't conceivably treat every single one of you. So I think that's where we start to see the struggle. So yeah.
Right. That's that's one of the key challenges and barriers. So there's been so many, you know, startup Silicon Valley attempts to enter healthcare, especially in the provider diagnostic space. And Theranos obviously is like the story of all. But I guess the positive spin on this, though, is when I talk to entrepreneurs or even students, if you're going into healthcare, you really got to think about the segments you're going after, right? I think for the Apples, well, that, I mean, I was really impressed that Apple actually did. They, you know, did design controls, right? They put a quality system in for the, you know, for the initial watch. Now the trouble is, I think, as you well pointed out, Amit, is that from a single lead ECG, you know, and then you're inferring some stuff from that, it's nowhere near the specificity that, well, not from a ROC specificity, but from a disease understanding perspective, that you're going to get with at least, you know, 3 electrodes and additional information. And this gets back to the data problem in healthcare. By definition, the very minority of the time you're sick, right? So the data sets that you need to really understand and to have faith that some inferred values out of a single lead electrode is going to have some predictive power, it's just so hard to find the signal out of that noise, and then to collect the data to do that and make it all happen and annotate it. You're talking about years and years of work when the patient could just show up into the GP's or the general physician's office, get a 12-lead ECG, and oh, okay, good, we rule, right? Or take a troponin. So it's understanding the use cases, in having that insight. A lot of times the consumer companies don't have, and then just understand the economics. There are maybe 6,000 hospitals in the United States. Building upon what Dev said, I'll use this often internal or in product discussions. There may be 30,000 plus or minus radiologists in the US. So if each of them somehow magically got $100 allocated to get subscription, that's $3 million, right? So I think for that value creation, big pies of money, you got to be thinking about the outside of the hospital areas, so wellness prediction, also too combining with the payers. I think most of the interesting VC monies and happening now is figuring out, well, how do you better track and look at a cohort of patients and go to the payers, whether it's CMS or independent or private payers. This is true also in different parts of the world. How do you kind of say, look, we're going to help you manage this disease, condition, or state? And it's a very different business model and thankfully, I think we're starting to stop hearing this phrase. What's the Uber for healthcare, right? It used to be, what's the Google for healthcare, right? So I think there's just these various differences, the economics, the business models. Look, I mean, I've worked in companies in med tech, right, where it's the disposable. That's where we make the revenue, right? Is have that disposable element. It's not, you're never gonna make revenue on like an iPhone model in hospital unless you have every patient getting one, right? So that's I think it's not just a technology problem. It's an understanding of the environment, the uses, product management, and also how these things get paid for without causing more cost to our already overburdened and wasteful health system.
Yeah, you brought up a good point on the challenges, right? Which I think is an interesting one. One is the data, and as you said, like there's the only thing is you capture the data as when the patient is sick, and that hopefully and thankfully is a very small sample in that patient journey. One of the other things that we have also noticed is there are enough claims aggregators that have the patient journey data, so that no longer is a big problem. One may always challenge the accuracy and completeness and latency of that data, but the data exists. Where I think the next set of challenges that occurs in healthcare is the surgical information, because it's pretty much in different hospital systems. There aren't like set standards on how to extract that information, and all the rules and regulations on privacy, de-identification, security. There are rules, but a lot of those are subject to kind of interpretation. So that piece, when you want to have a complete AI model, you pretty much have to get the data hospital by hospital, which generally takes a lot of time. And that's where I think the next evolution or revolution, or whatever is the right term, will happen with either the large players like Google or Amazon, or some startups who can have a better way to weave that data, pull that out from the hospital environment, and allow different companies to train their models on that data. The other thing,
go ahead.
The other thing that I also noted was, I think we talked about how it can help improve surgical outcomes and efficiencies. But the one other point that John mentioned is it's resonated with me very clearly. One is AI is a broad term. So we are sometimes also in this hype cycle where the possibilities are vast and impact will be significant, but the expectations are actually sometimes bigger, and we almost have to be realistic on timelines and feasibility. And now it actually is getting one of the drawbacks of COVID, and this had started even before COVID, but I mean, COVID had many other drawbacks, but from an information exchange perspective, while we talked about improved information exchange, there is also this nationalistic appeal that has started coming on information exchange on surgical outcomes. That I would have to imagine is going to be another challenge, along with just it's a weird situation where the hype of AI is high and the expectations are sky high, but the ability to exchange information is actually starting to get more limited.
That's actually a great point, because so when I was at Medtronic in the diabetes business, we had done a partnership with IBM Watson, right? I mean, I think IBM Watson was kind of one of the first, like I would say, the first industry owners of this idea of AI, and everyone saw the buzz about Watson competing with Ken Jennings on Jeopardy and winning. I mean, and then of course IBM was like, we got to get into health, right? And so we had leveraged them in diabetes, building a smart app to do some prediction of people when they're going too high or too low, and what again the immense applications you can have. Where you have the data of people now that CGM, continuous glucose monitoring, is pretty commonplace in diabetes treatment. But we were also living in the world where they'd gotten some backlash on PR, because I think they also had a cancer application. They were working with, I think, Sloan Kettering Hospital. And some people got wind of the fact that, oh, maybe Watson can cure my cancer, or like, now you're over promising, right? And so I think a lot of patients came in thinking that, okay, let me get the Watson treatment and that'll cure everything. And it was like, well, no, we got to be careful. We're just beginning to understand how, smart AI can help, predict and prevent diseases, but you don't want to say like, we'll cure cancer, because then of course you create all this like false expectation. So yeah, it's hard, because, the natural question is, yeah, AI is helping every other industry. Why is healthcare not, it should help healthcare and cure cure some of the issues, but there's all these systemic ways the healthcare industry works that just does not parlay to a good AI experience, or just the AI rules don't always apply because of whatever, all the different issues that we talked about. So yeah, and so we had to be careful about what we committed to saying that we could do with Watson, because we didn't want to get into the same marketing PR a bit of a storm to make people feel like we can cure their diabetes or we can solve all their problems. So I think it's yeah, you have to also level set expectations.
Yeah, that's one of the outside of healthcare, or just even more about the diagnostic and therapeutic journey. The data are always going to be confusing and wrong in medicine, right? I mean, I always chuckle a lot, even my former, this term, the digital twin, we're going to build a digital twin of patients, right? And it's like, well, if you could do that, there's like 5 Nobel Prizes to be awarded, right? I mean, the whole discipline of systems biology, and even it's very difficult because of all the complexities and nonlinearities in humans. So even if interoperability, we get great semantic interop, yeah, that's going to solve a whole lot of problems, but we're still always going to be in the tails, right, for a lot of these conditions. And this is where too, I think from an AI perspective, if you think of really where kind of a lot of the leading edge stuff is, it's not so much in the detection, classification, like, yes, especially in computer vision, pretty good at that, right? But you start thinking about how do you use those sensory tools and convolutional neural nets and adversarial nets to start bring up the layer, so you can start actually doing some world model type of estimation, so you can actually get in helping that decision-making process for the humans in the healthcare in particular, because there's so much inferencing from a statistical perspective, induction, that you just can't model a lot of this stuff, right? And so that's where is that challenge, whether it's it's from the pump or the surgical suite, or it's in the scanner room or ECG suite, is like how do you bring these information streams that are more valuable? How do you present the right good stuff to the people to allow them to be able to make the more informed decisions? I think is a really promising and cool idea, right? That I think cuts across all of medtech, right? Whether it's from the the more of the connected IoT side of medtech, all the way up to software as a medical device, like radiology PACS systems, or big informatics, IT stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's no industry, and I have several friends who are doctors, and I think one thing that's so interesting that you don't always think about, but it's like there's no other industry that has 7.1 billion different products that are all completely different to each other, right? I mean, that's the only place is humans, right? We are such unique, creatures that, and that's why I'm like anyone. I feel for anyone who's like in like customer support or any kind of like customer serving role at a med tech company that has to, gets questions about like, well, it didn't work this way with my patient, or it didn't do this, or like you said this and it didn't do this. So it's like, well, did the patient have other issues? Like, are there other comorbidities? Like, if you said that you'll detect this disease, or it didn't do that. Okay, well, I mean, there's a host of other reasons of what could be happening in that person's body, or the data could be missing a whole, segment of their behavior, what have you. And that was the error, right? It wasn't our technology, it wasn't our AI capabilities. It's really just the fact that a human is still a human, and there could be other sides to the story. So it's just why I think why we all are in it, because it's obviously gratifying and exciting, and you want to help people, but it's challenging at the same time because you just don't have anything else like that where everyone is so different. So, but a good segue into how we think AI will change medical devices over the next 5 years. I think we're kind of getting into, that future prediction. What do you all think? Maybe Dave, do you want to kick us off in terms of what do you see happening in 5 years as things get better and different?
Yeah, no, absolutely makes sense, right? So it's hard to predict what's going to happen in 5 years because this technology is changing very fast. However, I think in the preventative, I do see a lot of innovation happening in the preventative area as well as in the diagnostic area as well. In the therapeutic area, the possibilities are higher. The level of difficulty is actually equally high. But you can eventually imagine like a connected ecosystem with the patient, where you have the wearables who can kind of you can read the data from the wearables about the patient from a patient journey, and have a patient-specific treatment or a patient-specific product that might be required for a surgery. Right now, we are a little bit farther away from that. So that's why we have like a collection of products, and then we see which one fits based on the patient anatomy, based on the patient past history. But we can almost have a patient-specific product design all the way to a patient-specific surgery. And that would be significantly important because that would actually improve the outcomes for that patient. It would actually eventually reduce the surgical time, which will help improve surgical efficiency as well, because unfortunately or otherwise, the population is not getting any younger in the US. So 5 years from now, you will probably have more people that need healthcare than what you have now, which means in order for us to keep the costs low and outcomes improved, you have to use AI and link it with your wearables, link it with the patient journey to have a patient-specific surgical outcome design.
Yeah, how about you, John? Next 5 years, AI.
Yeah, I think the Bill Gates quote, right? We're usually poor, over guessing the short term, impact technology, but underwhelmed.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that perspective. Yeah.
So I guess too, if you think about the different dimensions to medtech, everywhere from the developing and planning. It's been years since I've been kind of in the trench of doing like hardcore, embedded device. I used to work with products like for high infusion of drugs into people or interventional products and cardiac cath. But back then, even the early 2000s, I was heavily involved in doing a lot of computational modeling, computational fluid dynamics, understanding too how stresses and strains on materials would in fact, servos and what would be the long-term wear. And we had the ability to access some data and streams back then. But I know today just by the pipes, if you will, the connections, the secure sockets, I would think, a designer, right, in manufacturing of devices that are either indwelling or being used in patients, having access to those streams of data would be so wonderful, right, for understanding and doing that virtual modeling, reducing the cycle time so you don't have to do as much verification, validation. I think that, and again from colleagues that are a little more in that design space, they at least inform me, I'm in the software world more and more. But so I think from that part of medtech, I really think that we're going to see some changes there that are driven because of the data pieces, but the understanding, real-time streaming and queuing and then managing the data sets. I think so so closer to home, where I've really been spending a lot of the time in the applications of image analysis and quote unquote AI in diagnostic imaging, which is one of the kind of the first always held, hey, this is where you're going to start seeing people don't need radiologists anymore. The computers will do it. It's like, we're very far from that. But at the same time, we are seeing actual mainstream uptake of a lot of these first generation of machine learning models. So I think in 5 years, there will be an understanding, though, of what's important, what's not, I don't need but this also depends on the geography, right? So there's an argument to be made in some parts of the world where you just don't have enough physicians that, yes, you're willing to take on some more automation because there's maybe one pediatric radiologist in all of South Africa or sub-Saharan Africa, right? But so if we put that out for a second, if we think about the developed world where you tend to have physicians, now we're also burning out healthcare staff left and right? We're overburdening them with poor software, poor designs. But I think what's going to happen probably the next 5 years, you start seeing where are the real needs, not just trying to replace or do stuff that the humans are pretty good at doing, but rather how do I automate the mundane, stupid stuff that I don't have to do it, like in pathology. Why am I counting slides or microscope cells, right? How do we automate all of the billing and reporting and coding stuff, right? So you don't have to be burning out physicians going home at night doing their dictation for 5 hours, right? How do you make all pre-authorizations? I mean, assuming too, hopefully there's some structural changes in the way that our whole healthcare system works, right? Because that leads to a lot of inefficiencies. But I could see AI really influencing that whole piece of it. And then whether software is a medical device or a hardware medical device, I think fitting within in that context, it's going to be helping the physicians and the care teams to be more precise, but also being less error prone and being less burnt out.
Yeah.
So again, I think we're at that inflection point. I feel like, maybe.
Cool. So we're approaching the end. I'm going to do a rapid fire kind of round. This is a fun question. So what are you personally most excited about or interested in when it comes to AI and medical devices? And let's, maybe try to both keep our answers short and sweet and perfect. So I would say for me, definitely it's going to be the at-home diagnostic space. I think the idea that I see a world where we eventually will not have any more 6-month PCP visits. We'll do everything at home. You can send stuff over the cloud and your physician will have all of your basic biometric measures, everything done through an easy kit that can be delivered at home and then will be sent up to the cloud. So I think that's going to be the future of just general preventative care. John or Dave, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think I just wanted to build up on that. I agree with you. I think the current process is fairly complex. And how do we, I think what I'm more excited about is this technology is going to help us make the process less complex. And actually, to the extent possible, would love to see the process move more upstream, meaning we have invested a lot of money, including the US government. Everybody invests a lot of money in therapeutics and in surgery and recovery. Would like to see this process move upstream in more on preventative and some sort of what I call as the entire business is based on anomaly and abnormality detection. How can you have positive feedback and a positive reinforcement model so that the anomaly and abnormality detection also should start going down? That's what I think the kind of the future power is here. That's what is very exciting to me.
And John, why don't you end us with your most exciting space that you're excited about?
Yeah, I think integrated diagnostics and treatment planning is going to be my answer. And what I mean by that is you can have a more cohesive view of that patient's information and insights from those information, from all those data streams, bringing them together to kind of help break down the silos that exist in medicine. So you no longer have to visit 5 different subspecialists to interpret the test, right? You can bring that information together, get that holistic view of the patient, use automation and analytics to help decide what's important to learn from either knowledge bases or from evidence guidelines, adapt those evidence guidelines, ultimately leading to the most precise and optimal treatment, for that patient. That's I think is the wave the magic wand.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing what happens. No one can tell the future, but I know it's gonna be bright for all of us in this space. So thank you, John, Dave. This has been a great conversation, and I'll turn over to Patrika to close us out.
Thank you all. This has been an awesome presentation, and a special thank you to Amit for moderating us and keeping us on track. That was awesome. And I know the audience is giving you a huge virtual round of applause. We really appreciate you sharing with us today. For the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. Along the way, make sure you accept your connection request and check out our amazing AI exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.